In the Gospel of the Essenes, there's a passage where Jesus teaches about breath, not shallow chest breathing, but what the text calls the sacred feminine breath, deep, belly breathing that activates the womb center in every human, regardless of biological gender. And here's what's shocking. The church deliberately taught you to breathe incorrectly. They taught chest breathing, shallow, controlled, never allowing breath to drop into the belly. Because when you breathe the way Jesus taught, when you allow breath to fill the womb space, you activate creative power the archons cannot control. If you've noticed you breathe shallowly into your upper chest, if your belly stays tight while your chest expands, you were taught to breathe this way, taught to keep breath away from the womb center, taught to suppress the sacred feminine through breathing pattern itself. Place both hands on your lower belly right now, below your navel. That's the womb center. In biological women, the physical womb resides there. But in all humans, the energetic womb exists, the creative center, the place where new reality gestates before manifesting. And when you breathe correctly, when you use sacred feminine breath, you send life force directly into that creative center. Over the next 2 hours, you're going to learn the complete sacred feminine breath practice that Jesus taught in the Essene communities. Not theory, technique. You'll learn the exact method described in the Gospel of the Essenes, the physiological reasons it works, the historical suppression campaign that replaced it with chest breathing, and the 30-day practice roadmap that will rewire your nervous system and reconnect you to creative power that operates independently of institutional approval. The Gospel of the Essenes describes what sacred feminine breath actually is. Not breath into the chest where the heart labors, but breath into the belly where creation dwells. When you breathe into the womb center, when you allow your belly to expand with each inhale, you activate what the mother placed in every human, the capacity to birth new reality, not through struggle, not through force, but through gestation, through allowing, through the feminine principle of receiving and nurturing until manifestation occurs naturally. This is why churches taught chest breathing. Chest breathing keeps you in masculine mode constantly. Action, effort, striving. But the belly is where being happens, where creation gestates. And when you're breathing only into chest, never into belly, you're operating from only half your creative capacity. Let's establish exactly what we're dealing with here. The Gospel of the Essenes is part of a collection of texts attributed to Edmund Bordeaux Szekely, published in the 1920s and 1930s. Szekely claimed to have translated these from Aramaic and Old Slavonic manuscripts he found in the secret archives of the Vatican and the Royal Library of the Habsburgs in Vienna. The academic establishment has questioned the authenticity of these specific manuscripts. Szekely never produced the original documents. No other scholar has verified their existence. The texts read more like early 20th century spiritualism than 1st century Aramaic composition. This matters. We need to be honest about sources. But here's what's equally important. The breathing technique described in these texts, regardless of whether Jesus personally taught it in 1st century Palestine, corresponds precisely to practices found in verifiable ancient traditions. Pranayama in yogic texts, dating to at least 400 BCE, Taoist breathing methods in the Zhuangzi from the 4th century BCE, Hesychast prayer breathing in Eastern Orthodox Christianity from the 4th century CE onward. The technique itself is ancient, cross-cultural, and documented in sources we can verify. So we're not making historical claims about Jesus teaching this specific practice. We're examining a breathing method that appears across traditions, that modern physiology can explain, and that the text attributes to Jesus as a literary device to transmit the teaching. The suppression narrative, churches teaching chest breathing instead, has basis in observable fact, even if the specific conspiracy is overstated. European Christianity, particularly post-Reformation Protestantism, emphasized cognitive faith and doctrinal correctness over embodied practices. Monasticism preserved some breathing awareness through liturgical chanting and contemplative prayer, but popular Christianity taught people to approach God through intellectual belief and moral behavior, not through body techniques. The body became something to be controlled, denied, transcended, not something through which divine connection flows. This created populations of people who literally forgot how to breathe using their full respiratory capacity. Modern humans in industrialized societies predominantly chest breathe. This isn't controversial. Respiratory therapists, singing teachers, martial arts instructors, yoga practitioners all observe the same pattern. Most people breathe shallowly into the upper chest, engaging primarily the accessory breathing muscles in the shoulders and neck rather than the diaphragm. This creates chronic tension, reduces oxygen exchange efficiency, and maintains the nervous system in sympathetic activation, the stress response. When you breathe only into your upper chest, your body interprets this as a threat state. Chest breathing is how you breathe when running from danger. Short, shallow, rapid breaths into the upper lungs. Your nervous system reads the breathing pattern and responds accordingly. Stress hormones, heightened vigilance, reduced digestive function, decreased creative and reflective cognition. You're not being chased by a predator, but your breathing pattern tells your body you are. Diaphragmatic breathing, belly breathing, engages the parasympathetic nervous system. Rest and digest, repair and restore. When you breathe deeply into the lower abdomen, the diaphragm descends fully, creating negative pressure that draws air into the lower lobes of the lungs, where the majority of blood flow occurs. Gas exchange becomes more efficient. You oxygenate your blood more effectively with less effort. But the mechanical efficiency is secondary to the neurological effect. The diaphragm's movement massages the vagus nerve, which runs from the brainstem through the thorax and abdomen. Vagal stimulation activates the parasympathetic nervous system directly. Your heart rate variability increases, a marker of nervous system resilience and health. Cortisol decreases. The prefrontal cortex comes online, allowing for complex thought, creativity, and emotional regulation. This is measurable, reproducible, not mystical belief, but biological mechanism. The Gospel of the Essenes describes what happens when you shift from chest breathing to sacred feminine breath. The anxiety that drives constant doing begins to quiet. The need to force and control starts to release. You discover that reality responds to allowing as powerfully as it responds to action. You birth outcomes through gestation, holding clear intention in the womb center and allowing the creative process to unfold. Strip away the metaphysical language and you have an accurate description of what happens neurologically when you shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic dominance. Anxiety is sympathetic activation. The doing compulsion is your nervous system trying to resolve a perceived threat through action. When you downregulate through breathing, the compulsion to constantly act decreases. You can hold intention without immediately forcing outcome. You can wait for timing. You can recognize opportunity when it emerges rather than manufacturing opportunity through willpower alone. The womb center referenced in the text corresponds to what Chinese medicine calls the lower dantian, located approximately 3 finger widths below the navel and 2 finger widths inward toward the spine. In Japanese martial arts, this is the hara. In yogic anatomy, this area relates to the 2nd and 3rd chakras, Svadhisthana and Manipura. Though the womb center emphasis suggests more focus on the Svadhisthana, the sacral chakra associated with creativity, emotion, and generation. In Western anatomy, this area houses the enteric nervous system, the hundreds of millions of neurons lining your digestive tract. Your gut produces more neurotransmitters than your brain. 90% of your body's serotonin is manufactured in your intestines. The enteric nervous system operates semi-independently of the central nervous system. It processes information, makes decisions, initiates action without conscious input. When people talk about gut instinct or gut knowing, they're describing real neurological function. The enteric nervous system perceives and responds to environmental data that doesn't reach conscious awareness. Breathing into the lower abdomen creates movement in this area. Physical movement of the abdominal organs as the diaphragm descends, pressure changes, stimulation of the enteric nervous system, increased blood flow to the pelvic region. In women, this includes the physical reproductive organs. In all humans, this includes the energetic association of this area with creativity, generation, and manifestation. Not as woo, but as neurological and hormonal function. The lower abdomen is where deep relaxation allows creative insight to emerge, where sexual energy resides, where the body's regenerative capacity is strongest. When you chronically breathe only into your chest, never allowing breath to drop into the belly, you're cutting yourself off from these functions. Not metaphorically, literally. You're maintaining chronic tension in the abdomen, reducing blood flow, keeping the area in a low-grade stress state. Now let's examine the specific technique as described in the Gospel of the Essenes, then cross-reference it with verified ancient practices to establish the broader tradition this fits within. The Gospel describes the technique Jesus taught for sacred feminine breath. You sit or stand with spine straight. You place both hands on your lower belly below your navel, and you begin to breathe, not into your chest, into your belly. You inhale, and instead of your chest expanding, your belly expands. Your hands move outward. You hold for a moment at the top of the inhale, allowing the breath to settle fully into the womb center. Then you exhale slowly. Your belly contracts. Your hands move inward. You feel your lower abdomen emptying completely, and at the bottom of the exhale you pause again. Empty, receptive. This is sacred feminine breath. Belly breathing, womb breathing. Let's break this down mechanically. Spine straight means you're not compressing the abdomen or thorax. Sitting or standing both work. Lying down also works but can induce drowsiness, so vertical positions are better for active practice. You place both hands on your lower belly below the navel. This creates biofeedback. You can feel whether your belly is actually expanding or whether you're still chest breathing. Many people think they're belly breathing when they're actually just pushing their belly out while still breathing shallowly into the chest. The hand placement helps you distinguish real diaphragmatic movement from muscular mimicry. You begin the inhale. The instruction is to breathe into your belly, not your chest. Anatomically, air goes into your lungs, not your belly. But the instruction creates the correct mental framework. When you intend to breathe into your belly, you allow the diaphragm to descend. The diaphragm is a dome-shaped muscle separating the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. When it contracts, it flattens, moving downward. This creates negative pressure in the thoracic cavity, drawing air into the lungs, but it also pushes the abdominal organs downward and outward, causing the belly to expand. So while air goes into lungs, the felt sense is of breathing into the belly. Your hands should move outward as your belly expands. If your chest rises while your belly stays flat or even pulls inward, you're chest breathing. The correct pattern is belly expansion first, then the chest may gently rise as the lungs fill completely, but the primary movement is abdominal. The inhale should be smooth and steady, through the nose if possible. Nasal breathing filters, warms, and humidifies the air. It also creates slight resistance that helps regulate breathing rate. The text says to hold for a moment at the top of the inhale, allowing the breath to settle fully into the womb center. This retention isn't long, not a forceful hold, just a natural pause, 2 to 4 seconds, long enough to feel the fullness, to allow the oxygen to begin exchanging across the alveolar membrane to direct awareness to the lower abdomen. The awareness direction is key. You're not just mechanically breathing, you're placing attention in the area you want to activate. Attention directs energy, neural activity, blood flow. Where you place awareness, physiological activation follows. Then the exhale. The text says exhale slowly. The belly contracts. Your hands move inward. You feel your lower abdomen emptying completely. The exhale should be longer than the inhale. This is crucial for parasympathetic activation. When your exhale is longer than your inhale, you stimulate the vagus nerve more strongly. A good starting ratio is inhale for 4 counts, hold for 2, exhale for 6 counts, hold empty for 2. This creates a rhythm, 4, 2, 6, 2. But you don't need to be rigid about counting. The principle is more important than the exact ratio. Exhale longer than you inhale. Allow the belly to contract naturally as the diaphragm relaxes back up into its dome shape. Don't force the exhale by pulling the belly in aggressively. Let it happen organically with gentle engagement of the abdominal muscles toward the end to empty completely. The bottom of exhale, pause, empty, receptive. This is the most important moment in the breath cycle for the practice's metaphysical dimension. The empty pause is where you're completely receptive, completely yin, completely in allowing mode. No air in the lungs, no doing, just being. The text uses feminine principle language, receptivity, allowing, gestation. This maps onto the empty exhale pause. You're not forcing anything, you're creating space. Emptiness into which something new can enter. In Taoist breathing practices, the empty pause is where internal alchemy occurs. In Hesychast prayer, the pause is where the prayer word sinks from mind into heart. The empty moment is where transformation happens. Now let's look at verified ancient sources to see how this practice appears across traditions. In the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, composed around 400 BCE to 200 CE, Sutra 1.34 describes breath regulation as a method for calming the mind. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika from the 15th century CE provides detailed pranayama techniques, many of which emphasize abdominal breathing, breath retention, and the manipulation of prana through breath. The text describes Nadi Shodhana, alternate nostril breathing, which balances the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. It describes Bhastrika and Kapalabhati, forceful breathing practices that clear energetic blockages. And it describes the natural breathing pattern of the yogi as smooth, deep, and primarily abdominal. The text explicitly states that chest breathing is shallow and inefficient, suitable only for those who haven't trained the breath. The yogi breathes into the lower abdomen, engaging the full capacity of the lungs. In Taoist texts, the Zhuangzi from the 4th century BCE describes the breath of the true person as extending down to the heels, while the breath of the common person is shallow and throat-based. The text doesn't mean you literally breathe with your heels, but that breath awareness and energetic activation extend through the entire body. Rooted in the lower Dantian, the Taoist text Taishang Laojun Yangsheng Jua from the Han Dynasty describes embryonic breathing. Breathing so deep and quiet it's as if you're still in the womb. The breath extends into the lower abdomen, the mind settles. The practitioner enters a state where prenatal ki can be cultivated. Prenatal ki in Taoist thought is your original life force, inherited from your parents, stored in the kidneys and lower dantian. Postnatal ki is the energy you generate from food and breath. Deep abdominal breathing that activates the lower dantian preserves and replenishes prenatal ki, extending longevity and enhancing vitality. In Christian hesychasm, practitioners of the Jesus prayer use synchronized breathing to internalize the prayer. The standard formula is, "Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner." Practitioners breathe in on the first half, breathe out on the second half. Over time, the prayer descends from the mind to the heart. Not the physical heart, but the spiritual center located in the chest. However, some hesychast texts describe a further descent of awareness to the belly. The Philokalia, a collection of hesychast writings from the 4th to 15th centuries CE, includes instructions from various fathers about breath and attention. Nicephorus the Solitary, 13th century, instructs the practitioner to sit with head bowed, directing attention to the navel area, slowing the breath, and allowing the prayer to synchronize with breathing rhythm. The goal is to bring the mind into the heart, but the anatomical focus on the navel area suggests awareness of the lower energetic center, similar to the dantian or womb center. What's striking across these traditions is the consistent emphasis on deep abdominal breathing, as opposed to shallow chest breathing, the association of deep breathing with spiritual development, and the association of the lower abdomen with energetic generation and spiritual power. This isn't unique to one culture or one teacher. It's a human discovery that appears wherever people systematically explore consciousness through embodied practice. The breath is the most accessible point of intervention in the autonomic nervous system. You can't consciously control your digestion or your heart rate directly, but you can control your breath. And through breath, you can influence all the systems that are normally automatic. This makes breath the bridge between conscious and unconscious, between voluntary and involuntary, between mind and body. The Gospel of the Essenes describes what happens when you practice sacred feminine breath daily. First, the body relaxes. Tension you've carried for years begins to release. Because chest breathing activates stress response constantly, but belly breathing activates rest and digest response. Second, intuition strengthens. The womb center is where gut knowing lives, where instinct resides, and when you breathe into that center daily, your intuitive capacity expands dramatically. Third, manifestation accelerates. Not because you're working harder, because you're creating correctly. You're using the feminine principle, gestation and allowing, in addition to the masculine principle, action and effort. Let's examine each of these claims against what we know physiologically and psychologically. First claim, the body relaxes and chronic tension releases. This is straightforward. Chronic chest breathing maintains chronic muscle tension in the shoulders, neck, and upper back. The accessory breathing muscles, scalens, sternocleidomastoid, upper trapezius, are recruited constantly. They're not designed for continuous use. They're meant to assist during heavy exertion. When you use them for every breath, all day, every day, they develop trigger points and chronic tension patterns. When you shift to diaphragmatic breathing, these muscles can release. The diaphragm takes over the work it's designed for. The shoulder and neck muscles relax. This isn't a one-time shift. It takes consistent practice. Your breathing pattern is a deeply ingrained habit, maintained by neural patterns in the brainstem. Retraining takes repetition. But with daily practice over weeks, the body learns the new pattern. Tension that's been held for years can release. People often experience this as emotional release as well because muscular tension stores emotional memory. The body has been holding the breath pattern of chronic stress. When the pattern releases, the emotional content associated with it can surface. Second claim, intuition strengthens. This is more complex but defensible. Intuition is pattern recognition happening below the threshold of conscious awareness. Your unconscious mind processes vastly more information than your conscious mind. It detects patterns, makes connections, arrives at conclusions without you knowing how. When these conclusions surface into awareness, you experience them as gut feeling, intuition, instinct. The enteric nervous system contributes to this. It's monitoring your internal state and the environment constantly, responding to cues that don't register consciously. When you're chronically in sympathetic activation, chronic chest breathing, your nervous system is in threat detection mode. This narrows attention. You focus on immediate threats, you miss subtle cues, you override gut feeling with mental override. I should be able to handle this. I need to push through. I can't trust my discomfort. When you shift to parasympathetic dominance through deep breathing, your attention widens, you pick up subtle cues, and you're more likely to notice and trust the gut responses that represent unconscious pattern recognition. So the practice doesn't give you supernatural intuition. It removes the interference that's blocking your natural intuitive capacity. Third claim, manifestation accelerates. Strip away the metaphysical framing, and this describes a shift in how you pursue goals. Sympathetic dominance creates a bias toward action, doing, forcing, pushing. This works for certain types of goals. If you need to overcome immediate obstacles through effort, sympathetic activation helps. But many goals don't respond well to constant pushing. Creative work requires incubation time. Relationship development requires patience and attunement. Complex problem solving requires allowing your unconscious to work on the problem while your conscious mind rests. Business opportunities often require waiting for right timing rather than forcing premature action. When you're chronically in doing mode, you miss these. You try to force everything through direct action. You burn out. You create resistant dynamics where pushing harder makes things worse. Parasympathetic practice teaches you to hold intention without constant action. You become comfortable with gestation periods. You learn to recognize when action is appropriate and when allowing is appropriate. This isn't mystical manifestation. It's becoming a more skillful actor in the world by having access to both active and receptive modes. Now we need to address the suppression narrative directly, because this is where teachings like this often veer into manipulation. The text claims churches deliberately taught chest breathing to suppress connection to Divine Mother and feminine creative power. Did churches literally instruct people in breathing technique to maintain control? No. There's no historical evidence of deliberate breathing instruction campaigns. Churches taught doctrine, not breathing. But did the overall orientation of Western Christianity create conditions where embodied practices were devalued and forgotten? Yes. This happened through several mechanisms. First, the Platonic influence in early Christian theology created body-spirit dualism. The body was the fallen material realm. The spirit was the divine, immaterial realm. Salvation meant transcending the body, not awakening through the body. This created a theological framework that implicitly devalued embodied practices. Second, the Reformation's emphasis on sola scriptura and intellectual faith meant that meditative and contemplative practices preserved in monasticism didn't transmit to the broader population. Third, the scientific revolution and enlightenment further emphasized rational mind over feeling body. And fourth, industrialization required populations that would endure repetitive, physically demanding labor that was often dehumanizing. A population trained in deep relaxation and interoceptive awareness might not tolerate factory conditions as easily. But here's the critical distinction. These factors created conditions where breathing practices were forgotten. That's different from a deliberate conspiracy to suppress them. Conspiracy narratives can be true. Groups do sometimes coordinate to suppress knowledge, but often the suppression happens through systemic factors, without anyone needing to consciously coordinate. The outcome is the same, knowledge is lost. But the mechanism matters for how you relate to the teaching. If you approach this as the evil church conspired to control you, you're in a combative, paranoid stance. If you approach it as cultural and theological factors led to the loss of practices that are worth reclaiming. You're in a reclamation stance. One creates division and resentment. The other creates motivation to recover what was lost without needing an enemy. The text describes why churches specifically taught chest breathing, because the womb center is where humans connect to the Divine Mother, to Sophia, to the feminine aspect of God the patriarchal church erased. When you breathe into the womb center, you access power that doesn't need church approval, doesn't require priestly mediation. You become creator, and creators cannot be controlled. There's truth here mixed with overstatement. The church did marginalize feminine divine imagery. Sophia, wisdom personified as feminine in Proverbs and deuterocanonical texts, was never developed into mainstream Christian theology the way masculine divine images were. Mary absorbed some of this in Catholic and Orthodox traditions, but Protestantism rejected Marian devotion, leaving even that reduced. The result was a heavily masculine God image. This wasn't theologically necessary. Early Christian mystics and Gnostic groups maintained feminine divine imagery. It was suppressed through the standardization of orthodox doctrine and the persecution of groups deemed heretical. And yes, practices that generate direct experience of divine presence do reduce dependence on institutional mediation. If you can access transcendent states through your own practice, you need priests and bishops less. This tension exists in all institutional religion. The institution claims authority to mediate access to the divine. Mystics discover direct access. The institution often responds by either absorbing the mystic into sanctioned monasticism or persecuting the mystic as heretical. Christian history has examples of both, but again, this doesn't require attributing conscious malice to every church leader. Many genuinely believed that unauthorized mystical experiences were demonic deception. The suppression happened because the institution developed in a way that prioritized doctrinal control over experiential practice. Not necessarily because leaders sat in rooms plotting to keep people powerless, though some surely did. The point is, the practice itself is valuable regardless of whether the suppression was deliberate conspiracy or systemic byproduct of theological development. Let's move into the practical application. The text describes 3 applications of sacred feminine breath. First, manifestation breathing. When you have clear intention for what you want to create, you breathe it into your womb center. You inhale, and as your belly expands, you imagine your intention entering that creative space. You hold, allowing it to settle. You exhale, releasing attachment. You're gestating your intention until it's ready to birth into material reality. Second, healing breathing. When you have physical pain or illness, you breathe into the womb center while holding awareness of the affected area. The womb center is where regeneration happens, where the body's natural healing capacity resides, and when you activate it with conscious breath, healing accelerates. Third, creative breathing. When you're doing creative work, writing, art, problem solving, you maintain sacred feminine breath throughout. This keeps you connected to the creative source within. It allows ideas and solutions to arise naturally from the womb center, rather than being manufactured by mental effort. Let's detail each application with specific instructions. Manifestation breathing. Sit comfortably with spine straight. Place your hands on your lower abdomen. Bring to mind something you want to create or manifest. Be specific. Not, I want to be successful, but I want to complete this specific project by this date. Or, I want to develop this particular skill to this level. Clear intention is essential. Vague intention produces vague results. Once you have clear intention, you're going to breathe it into your womb center for a dedicated practice period. Start with 5 minutes. You can extend as you develop the practice. Begin the breath cycle. Inhale deeply into the belly, feeling your hands move outward. As you inhale, Imagine your intention as energy, light, or whatever image works for you, entering through the crown of your head and traveling down into your lower abdomen. See it settling into the womb center. Hold for a few seconds. Feel the intention resting in the creative center. Then exhale slowly, but instead of visualizing the intention leaving, you're releasing attachment to the outcome. You're releasing the need to control how it manifests. You're releasing the anxiety about whether it will happen. The intention stays in the womb center, gestating. But your grip on it releases. Repeat for the full 5 minutes. This practice works not through magic, but through a combination of clarifying intention, deepening relaxation, and priming your unconscious to recognize opportunities related to your intention. When you repeatedly focus on specific intention, while in a deeply relaxed state, several things happen neurologically. First, you strengthen the neural networks associated with that intention. Neurons that fire together wire together. You're creating and reinforcing the mental models related to your goal. Second, you're linking the intention to the relaxed, creative state. This means when you encounter situations related to your goal, you're more likely to respond creatively rather than anxiously. Third, you're training your reticular activating system to prioritize information related to your intention. The RAS filters incoming sensory data, determining what reaches conscious awareness. When you repeatedly focus on something, you train your RAS to flag related information. This is why when you decide you want a specific car, you suddenly see that car everywhere. The cars are always there. Your RAS is now filtering for them. Manifestation breathing uses this mechanism deliberately. You're not magically attracting reality. You're training your brain to recognize and respond to opportunities that were already present but filtered out. Healing breathing. Sit or lie comfortably. Place hands on your lower abdomen. Bring awareness to the area of your body that needs healing. Physical pain, illness, injury. Don't try to push away the discomfort. Just acknowledge it. Now begin the sacred feminine breath. Inhale deeply into the belly. As you inhale, imagine breath and healing energy flowing, not just into your lungs, but circulating through your entire body, concentrating in the area that needs healing. Hold briefly, then exhale slowly, and as you exhale, imagine tension, pain, toxins, whatever needs to be released, flowing out of the affected area and out of your body. Continue this for 10 to 20 minutes. This practice works through several mechanisms. First, deep breathing increases oxygenation. Healing requires energy. Energy production requires oxygen. Better oxygenation supports cellular repair. Second, parasympathetic activation enhances immune function. Chronic stress suppresses immune response. Relaxation enhances it. Third, focusing attention on the affected area increases blood flow to that area. Attention and blood flow are linked. Where you place awareness, circulation follows. Fourth, you're reducing pain-fear cycle. Pain creates fear and tension. Tension worsens pain. By breathing through pain with relaxation, you interrupt the cycle. There are limitations. This is not substitute for medical treatment. If you have serious illness or injury, get medical care. Breathing practice is complementary, not alternative. But within those limits, breath practice demonstrably supports healing. Post-surgical recovery, chronic pain management, autoimmune conditions, digestive issues, all show improvement when patients practice deep breathing. The research is extensive. This isn't woo. It's well-established clinical application. Creative breathing. When you're doing creative work, maintain sacred feminine breath throughout the work session. This is different from the first two applications because you're not doing dedicated breathing practice then returning to normal activity. You're changing your baseline breathing pattern while you work. Start your creative session, writing, painting, coding, whatever your work is. Before you begin the actual work, do 2 minutes of focused sacred feminine breath to establish the pattern. Slow, deep belly breaths. Then begin working, but maintain awareness of your breath. Don't let it become shallow and thoracic. Keep breathing into the belly. This will feel awkward at first. Attention is divided between the work and the breath. But with practice, the breath becomes automatic, and you can focus fully on the work while maintaining the breathing pattern. This keeps you in parasympathetic dominance, which enhances creativity. The default mode network, active during creative insight, functions better when you're relaxed. Stress shuts down creative cognition in favor of narrow, threat-focused attention. By maintaining deep breathing, you maintain the physiological state that supports creative flow. Now let's examine the difference between people who breathe correctly versus those who don't, as described in the Gospel. Those who breathe into the chest only appear busy, active, but anxious, driven, never at peace. They accomplish through effort and struggle. Those who breathe into the belly appear calm, relaxed, but deeply powerful. They accomplish through allowing and timing. They create through gestation and natural unfolding, and they maintain energy because they're working with their full creative capacity. This is accurate observation of 2 different operating modes. Chest breathers are in chronic sympathetic activation. This shows up as busyness, anxiety, driven quality. They're always doing because their nervous system is always in threat response. Doing is attempt to resolve the perceived threat. They accomplish things. Sympathetic drive is useful, but it's exhausting, it burns out, and it misses opportunities that require patience and timing. Belly breathers are in parasympathetic activation most of the time, with sympathetic activation available when needed. They appear calm because they are calm. The nervous system is relaxed, but they're not passive, they're actively engaged. The difference is they can wait, they can allow, they can respond to timing rather than forcing prematurely. They conserve energy because they're not maintaining chronic tension and stress response. Neither mode is superior in all contexts. There are situations that require sympathetic drive, emergencies, deadlines, intense effort. But Western culture overvalues the sympathetic and undervalues the parasympathetic. We celebrate busyness and treat rest as laziness. We admire people who work themselves to exhaustion. We're suspicious of people who seem too relaxed. This creates a culture of chronic stress, burnout, anxiety, and the health problems that follow from constant sympathetic activation. Reclaiming deep breathing isn't about rejecting action. It's about restoring balance so you have access to both modes and can use whichever is appropriate. Now we're going to go much deeper into the mechanics of establishing this practice, troubleshooting problems, and developing it over time. When you first attempt sacred feminine breath, several obstacles commonly appear. First, you can't feel your belly moving. Your hands stay still while your chest rises. This means you've lost conscious access to diaphragmatic breathing. The diaphragm is still functioning. You're alive, so you're breathing, but it's not descending fully. You're using accessory muscles. To retrain this, lie on your back with knees bent, feet flat on floor. Place one hand on your chest, one on your belly. As you breathe in, try to make the belly hand rise while the chest hand stays relatively still. This position makes it easier to feel the diaphragm's action. Gravity assists the abdominal organs to drop, allowing the diaphragm to descend. Practice in this position for several minutes daily until you can consistently move the belly hand without the chest hand rising. Then practice sitting, then standing. You're retraining the motor pattern. Second obstacle, you feel dizzy or lightheaded when you breathe deeply. This is common initially. You're used to breathing shallowly. When you suddenly increase oxygen intake, the shift in blood CO2 levels can create temporary lightheadedness. Don't force deep breathing if this happens. Breathe normally until the sensation passes. Gradually increase depth over days and weeks. your body will adapt. Also check that you're not hyperventilating, breathing too rapidly. Deep breathing should be slow. If you're taking deep breaths quickly, you'll hyperventilate. The rate should be slower than your normal breathing rate. Roughly 6 to 8 breaths per minute is good for practice. Normal unconscious breathing is 12 to 20 breaths per minute, so you're slowing significantly. Third obstacle. Breathing deeply makes you anxious. This seems paradoxical. Deep breathing should calm, but sometimes when people first practice, anxiety increases. This happens because you're removing a defense mechanism. Shallow breathing numbs feeling. It keeps you slightly dissociated from body sensation. When you breathe deeply, you come back into your body. Sensations you've been avoiding surface. Emotions you've been suppressing emerge. This can feel threatening. If this happens, proceed gradually. Don't force long practice sessions. Start with 30 seconds, 1 minute. Build slowly, and make sure you're in a safe environment. Don't practice while driving or in situations where you need to maintain vigilant attention. The anxiety may also indicate trauma held in the body. Deep breathing can trigger trauma release. If you have significant trauma history, consider working with a therapist trained in somatic approaches who can support breath work. Fourth obstacle. You can't maintain focus. Your mind wanders constantly during practice. This is normal. Meditation and breath work are attention training. Your mind will wander. The practice is noticing when it's wandered and returning attention to the breath. Don't judge the wandering. Just notice and return. Every time you notice and return, you're strengthening the attention circuit. That's the practice. You're not failing when your mind wanders. You're succeeding when you notice. Fifth obstacle. Physical discomfort. Your back hurts, legs fall asleep. You can't find comfortable position. Adjust your position. You don't need to be rigidly upright. You can sit in a chair with back support. You can lie down, though this may induce sleep. You can walk while breathing, though this is advanced practice. Find a position you can maintain comfortably for your practice duration. As your body relaxes over time, you'll be able to sit longer without discomfort. Sixth obstacle. Nothing happens. You practice for days or weeks and don't notice any change. This is often perceptual. Changes are happening, but they're subtle. Keep a practice journal. Note your baseline state before starting the practice. Anxiety level, energy level, sleep quality, creative output, whatever metrics matter to you. Then track these weekly. You'll likely notice gradual improvement that's not obvious day to day. Also, some people need longer than others to shift out of chronic stress patterns. If you've been chest breathing for decades, retraining takes time. Stay consistent. The neurological and physiological changes are happening, even if you don't feel dramatically different immediately. Let's establish a 30-day practice roadmap. This gives you structured progression from beginner to established practitioner. Days 1 through 7. Establishing the basic pattern. Practice lying down, 10 minutes per day. Focus entirely on feeling the belly rise and fall. Don't worry about retention, visualization, or anything else. Just learn the physical mechanism. Hand on belly, hand on chest. Belly hand moves, chest hand doesn't. Slow, steady breaths through the nose. When the 10 minutes is complete, return to normal activity. Notice throughout the day when you're chest breathing and consciously shift to belly breathing for a few breaths. You're building awareness. Days 8 through 14. Introducing retention. Continue 10-minute daily practice, but now add brief retention at top and bottom of breath. 2 to 4 seconds. Inhale into belly, hold 2 to 4 seconds. Exhale slowly. Hold empty 2 to 4 seconds. This begins to engage the vagus nerve more strongly. You may notice deeper relaxation. Continue the throughout the day awareness. When you notice chest breathing, shift to belly breathing with retention. Start to notice what triggers chest breathing. Stress, certain activities, certain people. You're mapping your breathing patterns to your life patterns. Days 15 through 21, adding intention. Continue daily practice, now extended to 15 minutes. Incorporate one of the 3 applications: manifestation, healing, or creative. Choose the one most relevant to your current life. If you have a specific goal, use manifestation breathing. If you're dealing with pain or illness, use healing breathing. If you're working on creative project, use creative breathing. Practice the chosen application daily for the 15 minutes. Also begin incorporating the breathing into the relevant activity. If you chose manifestation, take 2 minutes at the start of each day to breathe your intention into the womb center. If you chose healing, breathe into the affected area whenever you notice discomfort. If you chose creative, maintain sacred feminine breath during creative work sessions. Days 22 through 30, integration and troubleshooting. Continue daily 15-minute practice with chosen application, but now you're also establishing the breathing pattern as your default. Throughout the day, check in with your breath every hour. Set a timer if needed. Each time you check in, take 3 conscious belly breaths. This begins to shift your unconscious breathing pattern. Most of your breathing is unconscious. You can't consciously control every breath, but by repeatedly practicing the pattern, you train your brainstem to adopt it as default. By day 30, you should notice that you naturally breathe more deeply more often without conscious effort. Also, by day 30, assess what's changed. Review your journal notes from day 1. Compare to current state. Look for changes in anxiety, sleep, energy, creativity, intuition, sense of groundedness. Most people notice significant change by 30 days. Some notice change within the first week. A smaller percentage need longer. If you're in the group that needs longer, that's fine. Continue the practice. The neurological retraining is happening. It just needs more time for your particular nervous system. After the 30-day foundation, you're ready for advanced variations and deeper integration. Advanced Variation 1, Extended Retention. Ended. Once you're comfortable with short retentions, you can gradually extend them. Top of inhale retention can extend to 10, 15, even 20 seconds for advanced practitioners. Bottom of exhale retention can extend similarly, but build slowly. Add 1 or 2 seconds per week. Extended retention intensifies the practice's effects. It increases vagal stimulation. It deepens the relaxation response. It also increases the challenge, which strengthens attention and discipline. But don't force. If retention creates strain or panic, you've gone too far. Back off. Advanced Variation 2, Ratio Manipulation. The basic practice uses roughly equal inhale and exhale, maybe with slightly longer exhale. Advanced practice can use specific ratios for specific effects. For deep relaxation and parasympathetic activation, use 1:2 ratio. Inhale for 4, exhale for 8, or inhale for 5, exhale for 10. This strongly activates the vagus nerve and can induce very deep relaxation. For energizing practice, use equal ratio or even 2:1. Inhale for 6, exhale for 6, or inhale for 6, exhale for 4. This is more stimulating while still engaging diaphragmatic breathing. Experiment to find what serves you. Advanced Variation 3, Incorporating Sound. On the exhale, you can add vocalization, a simple ah sound, or om, or any tone that resonates with you. Vocalization adds vibrational component. The sound resonates in the chest and abdomen, creating internal massage. It also gives the mind something to focus on, which can help with wandering attention, and it forces complete exhalation, emptying the lungs fully, which makes the subsequent inhale deeper. Sound practice is common across traditions. Chanting, toning, singing, all use breath and sound together for physiological and spiritual effect. Advanced Variation 4, movement integration. Once the breathing pattern is established, integrate it with movement. Walking meditation with synchronized breath. Inhale for 4 steps, exhale for 6 steps. Yoga or Qigong with conscious belly breathing throughout. Even weight training can incorporate breath awareness, though the pattern will necessarily shift during heavy exertion. The point is to make sacred feminine breath your baseline so that whenever possible, this is how you breathe. Advanced variation 5. Partner practice. Practice with another person, sitting facing each other. Synchronize your breathing. This creates powerful interpersonal coherence. Your nervous systems begin to entrain. Heart rate variability synchronizes. The shared field of relaxation deepens. This is especially powerful for couples, parent-child pairs, or close friends. It builds intimacy and trust through nervous system co-regulation. Now let's examine what happens with long-term practice. Months and years of consistent sacred feminine breathing. First, the breathing pattern becomes unconscious. You no longer have to think about it. Your default breath is deep, diaphragmatic, slower than average. You only revert to chest breathing in actual stress situations, and you return to belly breathing quickly once the situation passes. This represents complete nervous system retraining. Your baseline has shifted from sympathetic to parasympathetic dominance. Second, your capacity for presence increases. Presence is function of nervous system state. When you're chronically anxious, you're pulled into future worry. When you're chronically depressed, you're stuck in past rumination. When you're deeply relaxed, you're in the present. The breath anchors you here, now. Long-term practitioners develop capacity to remain present even during challenging situations, not because they're avoiding the challenge, but because they're not adding anxiety on top of it. They can respond to what's actually happening rather than to imagined future disasters. Third, creative capacity expands. This isn't guaranteed. You can breathe deeply and still be uncreative if you don't practice creativity. But deep breathing removes one of the major obstacles to creativity: chronic tension and sympathetic activation. With that obstacle removed, if you're doing creative work, you'll likely find ideas flow more easily. You can sustain focus longer, and you're less blocked by perfectionism and fear. Fourth, intuitive capacity strengthens. You develop trust in gut knowing. You can distinguish between anxiety-driven impulse and genuine intuitive hit. This is subtle but important. Anxiety often masquerades as intuition. I have a bad feeling about this might be intuition warning you, or it might be anxiety projecting. Long-term practitioners develop the felt sense discrimination to tell the difference. They know what intuition feels like in their body versus what anxiety feels like. Fifth, relationship to effort changes. You discover that not everything requires force. Some things respond better to allowing, timing, patience. This doesn't mean you become passive. It means you develop discernment, when to push, when to wait. This often results in accomplishing more with less effort, not through laziness but through wisdom. You stop wasting energy on forcing things that aren't ready to move and direct energy toward things that are ripe for action. Sixth, health often improves. Blood pressure decreases, digestion improves, sleep quality improves, immune function strengthens, chronic pain often reduces. These aren't guaranteed. If you have serious health conditions, you need medical treatment. But breathing practice is one of the most powerful preventive and complementary health interventions available. It's free, accessible, and has essentially no side effects if practiced reasonably. Seventh, sense of self shifts. This is hardest to describe, but perhaps most significant. When you're chronically in sympathetic activation, your identity consolidates around doing. You are what you accomplish. Your worth is your productivity. This creates fragile self-esteem dependent on external validation. When you shift to parasympathetic baseline, you discover being underneath doing. You're not your accomplishments. You exist prior to achievement. This creates more stable sense of self. You can fail at things without your identity collapsing. You can succeed without inflating. You're just here, being, breathing, existing, regardless of external circumstances. These 7 changes represent the fruiting of the practice. They don't all happen for everyone. Individual results vary based on consistency, baseline nervous system state, life circumstances, trauma history, and many other factors. But these are the commonly reported long-term effects across practitioners of diaphragmatic breathing practices in multiple traditions. Now we need to address cultural and gendered dimensions of this teaching. The text frames this as sacred feminine breath and associates it with the womb, the Divine Mother, feminine creative principle. This framing can be helpful or limiting depending on how you receive it. It's helpful if it gives you permission to value receptivity, allowing gestation, qualities culturally coded feminine and therefore devalued in masculine dominant culture. Western culture rewards doing, forcing, achieving. It devalues being, allowing, receiving. If calling this feminine helps you reclaim these capacities, the framing serves you. But it's limiting if it creates the idea that men shouldn't practice this, or that it's only for women or feminine-identified people. The diaphragm doesn't have gender. The vagus nerve doesn't have gender. Parasympathetic activation works the same in all nervous systems. Men need this practice as much as women. Perhaps more, because masculine socialization often creates even more severe disconnection from the body and breath. Men are taught to be in their heads, to ignore the body, to push through discomfort. This creates populations of men who are completely cut off from interoceptive awareness. They don't know what they feel. They can't read their body signals. They override gut knowing with should-based thinking. Sacred feminine breath practice can help men reconnect to the body, to feeling, to intuition. It doesn't make them less masculine. It makes them more complete humans with access to the full range of human capacities. Similarly, framing this as womb breathing can be triggering for women who have had hysterectomies, women who are infertile, trans women who don't have wombs, trans men who do have wombs but don't identify with feminine framing. The practice itself doesn't require any particular reproductive anatomy. It requires a diaphragm and a lower abdomen. Everyone has these. The womb language is metaphoric, pointing to the creative, generative capacity in that region of the body. You can use different language that works for you. Lower belly breathing, dantian breathing, hara breathing, second chakra breathing. The name doesn't matter. The technique matters. The Divine Mother language similarly can be helpful or limiting. If you've related to God exclusively through masculine imagery and that's felt incomplete, exploring feminine divine imagery can be healing. Sophia, Shekinah, the mother aspect of God. This is valid theology with roots in scripture and tradition, but if you're not theistically oriented, you don't need Divine Mother theology to benefit from the practice. The breathing technique works through physiology. You can understand it entirely through nervous system science without any spiritual framework. Or you can use spiritual framework that resonates with you, whether that's Divine Mother, Kundalini, Chi, or anything else. The point is, don't let the cultural framing of the teaching prevent you from accessing the technique. Take what serves you, leave what doesn't. The core practice is simple. Breathe deeply into your lower abdomen, engage your diaphragm, activate parasympathetic nervous system. This works regardless of gender, theology, or cultural background. Let's now look at how this practice intersects with other contemplative and spiritual practices. If you meditate, sacred feminine breath can be your meditation object. Instead of watching thoughts or repeating a mantra, you place attention on the breath, counting breaths, feeling the belly rise and fall. This is basic mindfulness of breathing, which is foundational in Buddhist meditation. Anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, is one of the Buddha's core teachings. The instructions are nearly identical. Sit with spine erect, breathe naturally, place attention at the nostrils or the abdomen, feel the sensations of breath. When attention wanders, return it to breath. Continue for the duration of your meditation period. The Buddha's instructions don't specifically emphasize belly breathing versus chest breathing, but experienced meditation teachers often help students shift to abdominal breathing because it facilitates the stability and calm necessary for deeper meditation. If you practice yoga, sacred feminine breath enhances every asana. Yoga means union of breath, movement, and awareness. Most yoga classes teach breath-synchronized movement. Inhale as you extend, exhale as you fold. But many practitioners still breathe shallowly even while practicing yoga. Bringing conscious diaphragmatic breathing to your yoga practice deepens the effect significantly. Each pose becomes pranayama. Each movement becomes meditation. The practice transforms from physical exercise to moving meditation. If you practice contemplative prayer in Christian tradition, sacred feminine breath can enhance Lectio Divina, centering prayer, or Jesus prayer practice. Lectio Divina traditionally has 4 movements: Lectio, reading; Meditatio, meditation; Oratio, prayer; Contemplatio, contemplation. You can add breath awareness to each stage. Read scripture slowly while maintaining sacred feminine breath. Meditate on the passage while breathing deeply. Let your prayer arise from the belly rather than the head. Rest in contemplation with breath as anchor. Centering prayer, taught by Thomas Keating and others, instructs practitioners to choose a sacred word and return to it whenever thoughts arise. You can coordinate the sacred word with breath. Inhale, hold the word in awareness; exhale, release. Jesus prayer traditionally coordinates with breath. Lord Jesus Christ on the inhale, have mercy on me on the exhale. Shifting this to belly breathing rather than unconscious breathing deepens the practice. If you practice Qigong or Tai Chi, you're already working with breath and movement integration, but you can refine your practice by ensuring the breathing is truly diaphragmatic. Many Qigong forms instruct breathe naturally, which is good advice for preventing forcing, but natural for most people means shallow. Once diaphragmatic breathing becomes natural for you, then breathing naturally means breathing deeply. Your Qigong practice will become more powerful. Qi will circulate more freely. You'll feel energy movement more clearly. If you practice embodied creative work, dance, theatre, music, breath awareness is already part of your training. But you may have been taught to breathe for performance, rather than for parasympathetic activation. Singers learn breath control. Dancers learn to breathe while moving intensely. Actors learn to breathe to support voice. All of this is important. But adding sacred feminine breath as your baseline, outside of performance, supports the nervous system recovery that allows you to perform without burnout. Many performers are chronically anxious, driven, exhausted. This is partly the nature of performance, but partly because their nervous system never gets to deeply rest. Building daily sacred feminine breath practice gives you that rest. You can activate sympathetically for performance, then down-regulate parasympathetically for recovery. This sustainable rhythm prevents the burnout epidemic in performing arts. If you practice martial arts, breath is central. Aikido, Tai Chi Chuan, and internal martial arts explicitly teach breath cultivation. But even external martial arts like karate or taekwondo use breath. Kiai, the shout, is forceful exhalation coordinating with strike. But outside of active technique, martial artists benefit from cultivating deep belly breathing. This develops the hara, the center of power and stability. A martial artist who's breathing shallowly and tensely will be off balance and weak. A martial artist who's cultivated deep belly breathing will be rooted, stable, powerful. The power doesn't come from muscle tension, but from relaxed connection to center. Now let's address the metaphysical claims more directly because they permeate the text and practitioners should understand what's claimed versus what's evidenced. The text claims that breath into the womb center activates creative power the archons cannot control. Archons in Gnostic thought are cosmic rulers of the material realm, agents of the demiurge, who keep humans trapped in ignorance and matter. The claim is that certain practices liberate you from archonic control. This is mythological language. It can function as empowering metaphor. The archons are whatever systems, cultural, political, economic, psychological, keep you disempowered. Breath practice helps you recognize and resist these systems by developing inner stability that doesn't depend on external authority. This is reasonable psychological claim dressed in mythological language. But if you take the Archon claim literally, that there are actual cosmic entities trying to control humanity, you're in unfalsifiable territory. You can't test this. You can't prove or disprove the existence of Archons. You can observe that certain social systems do tend to keep people disempowered, and that practices which build autonomy and self-authority tend to threaten those systems. But that's human psychology and sociology, not cosmic warfare. Some practitioners find the literal Archon framework empowering. It gives them a way to understand systemic oppression and personal struggle. Others find it paranoid and disempowering. It creates a worldview where you're constantly fighting invisible enemies. Know yourself. Use the framework if it helps. Drop it if it creates fear and paranoia. The text claims that manifestation accelerates when you practice correctly. Manifestation in this context means bringing desired outcomes into reality. The claim is that breath practice makes you better at manifesting. We've already addressed the neurological mechanisms that support this. Clarified intention, RAS priming, enhanced creativity, better timing recognition. These are real, but they're not magic. You're not bending reality through thought. You're becoming more skillful at navigating reality through improved perception and response. This distinction matters. The magical manifestation teaching can create entitlement and blame. If you believe you manifest everything, then when bad things happen, you believe you manifested them through incorrect thinking or feeling. This is cruel. People don't manifest disease, abuse, or disaster through thought. Reality is more complex than that. But you can influence your outcomes through intention, attention, effort, and skillful action. Breath practice supports this. Just don't expect it to violate causality. The text claims healing accelerates through breath into the womb center. We've addressed real mechanisms: improved oxygenation, enhanced immune function, increased blood flow, pain-fear cycle interruption. These are documented. Breath practice does support healing, but it's not cure-all. You can breathe perfectly and still get sick. You can breathe perfectly and die. Breath practice is health supportive, not health guaranteeing. Use it. But also use medicine, proper nutrition, exercise, sleep, and all the other factors that affect health. Don't replace evidence-based medicine with breath practice. Complement evidence-based medicine with breath practice. The text claims churches taught chest breathing to suppress divine feminine connection. We've addressed this. No evidence of deliberate breathing instruction. Evidence of cultural and theological factors that led to devaluation of embodied practices. The outcome, loss of breath awareness, is real. The conspiratorial mechanism, deliberate suppression campaign, is not evidenced. You can reclaim the practice without needing the conspiracy. In fact, reclaiming it works better without the conspiracy because you're not carrying resentment and enemy identification. You're just recovering something valuable that was lost. The text claims you become creator, not believer. This is interesting framing. The implication is that traditional religion makes you passive believer, dependent on external salvation, while experiential practice makes you active creator of your reality. There's truth here. Religion can infantilize. It can create dependency on authority. It can suppress personal power and autonomy. This has happened. But religion can also empower. It can give meaning, community, ethical framework, connection to something larger than self. And experiential practice can become narcissistic. It can create spiritual materialism using practice to acquire power and status. It can lead to inflation where you believe you're creating reality through consciousness alone. Neither religion nor experiential practice is inherently superior. Both have shadow sides. The mature approach integrates. You can be part of religious community and practice embodied techniques. You can honor tradition and develop personal autonomy. You're not choosing between creator and believer. You're integrating both. What's the long-term trajectory of this practice if you maintain it for years or decades? Reports from long-term practitioners across traditions show consistent patterns. First, the practice becomes effortless. Initially, breathwork requires deliberate effort. You have to remember to practice. You have to maintain awareness. After years, it becomes as automatic as your heartbeat. You're always breathing this way unless you consciously choose otherwise. The nervous system has completely retrained. Second, the boundary between practice and life dissolves. You're not practicing breathing and then living life. The breathing is your life. Everything you do is informed by the awareness and presence the breath cultivates. Work, relationship, creative endeavor, rest. All of it happens in the context of breath awareness. This is what integration means. Not adding a practice to your life, but allowing the practice to transform your life. Third, subtle perception increases. This is harder to describe and may sound mystical, but practitioners consistently report heightened sensitivity to energy, emotion, intention, both their own and others. Whether you interpret this through an energetic framework, sensing ki or prana, or through a psychological framework, enhanced interoceptive and social awareness, the experience is the same. You pick up on subtle cues. You feel the emotional tone of environments. You sense when someone is lying, even if you can't articulate how you know. You feel energy shifts in your body that precede physical symptoms. This enhanced sensitivity can be overwhelming without proper boundaries. You're more permeable. But it also makes you more effective in navigating complex social and internal landscapes. Fourth, the body becomes a reliable wisdom source. Instead of overriding body signals with mental should thinking, you trust the body's intelligence. This doesn't mean never thinking or analysing. It means integrating body wisdom with mental analysis. When you're making decisions, you check in with your belly. Does this feel like expansion or contraction? Opening or closing? Movement toward or away? The felt sense provides data that complements rational analysis. Together, body wisdom and mental clarity produce better decisions than either alone. Fifth, presence in death preparation. This is rarely discussed in contemporary spirituality, but is central in traditional contemplative paths. Breath is life. When breath stops, life stops. Deep relationship with breath creates conscious relationship with the fact of death. You're not in denial about mortality. Every exhale is practice for the final exhale. This doesn't create morbidity. It creates appreciation for life and diminished fear of death. Many meditation traditions explicitly use breath awareness as death preparation. Tibetan Buddhism's Phawa practice transfers consciousness at death through breath and visualization. The technique works because you've spent years becoming intimate with breath. When death comes, the breath is familiar ground. You can meet death consciously rather than in panic or denial. Sixth, teaching transmission. Many long-term practitioners feel called to teach, not because they believe they've mastered anything, but because the practice has been so beneficial they want to share it. This is natural impulse, but it requires caution. Teaching breathing can harm if done poorly. You can hyperventilate people. You can trigger trauma. You can create dependency where students rely on you rather than their own practice. Good teaching empowers students to practice independently. It provides clear instruction, appropriate safety guidelines, and then gets out of the way. If you feel called to teach, study how to teach. Don't just start instructing people because you've practiced for a while. Learn pedagogy, learn nervous system regulation, learn trauma-informed approaches. Understand your scope of practice. You're not a therapist unless you're trained as one. You're not a medical doctor unless you're licensed. You're a breathing practitioner sharing a technique. Stay in your lane. Let's address community resources for practitioners. You don't have to practice alone. Many traditions offer training in breathwork, pranayama through yoga studios and dedicated yoga teachers, qigong through martial arts schools and qigong institutes, breathwork through modern breathwork facilitators trained in methods like holotropic breathwork, transformational breath, or Wim Hof method, meditation sanghas where breath is primary practice object, Christian contemplative groups working with hesychast methods. Each approach has different emphasis and methodology, but all recognize breath as central tool for consciousness development. When choosing a teacher or program, look for several qualities. First, embodiment. Does the teacher actually practice what they teach? You can tell. Embodied teachers have calm nervous systems, present awareness, and genuine humility. Unembodied teachers talk about practice without demonstrating it. Second, clear methodology. Good teaching provides specific instruction, not vague spirituality but concrete technique. How exactly do you position your body? How exactly do you breathe? What exactly are the effects you can expect? Third, safety awareness. Good teachers know breathwork can trigger trauma, hyperventilation, panic. They provide safety guidelines, contraindications, and resources for when practice brings up difficulty. Fourth, non-coercion. Good teachers empower student autonomy. They don't create dependency or claim special authority. They share technique and support students to develop their own practice. Avoid teachers who claim exclusive access to truth, who create cult-like devotion, who charge exorbitant fees for simple techniques, who promise miraculous cures, who blame students for difficulties in practice, or who mix breath teaching with multi-level marketing or other business schemes. These are red flags. Breath is free. The technique is simple. No one owns it. You're paying a teacher for their time and expertise in transmission, not for the breath itself. If someone is trying to sell you the secret to breathing, walk away. For self-study resources, several books provide excellent instruction. The Healing Power of the Breath by Richard Brown and Patricia Gerbag offers evidence-based breathing techniques with neurological explanations. The Tao of Natural Breathing by Dennis Lewis explores Taoist breathing from a Western practitioner's perspective. Light on Pranayama by BKSC Iyengar provides detailed pranayama instruction from a yoga master. The Breathing Book by Donna Farhi offers comprehensive exploration of breath anatomy and practice. These are all accessible to general readers without requiring extensive background in the respective traditions. Online resources include videos demonstrating techniques, though quality varies dramatically. Look for instruction from credentialed teachers in established traditions rather than random YouTubers. Wim Hof's breathing method has gained popularity and has some research backing, though it's quite different from sacred feminine breath. Wim Hof emphasizes rapid, forceful breathing followed by long retention, which creates intense sympathetic activation, followed by deep parasympathetic rebound. It's powerful, but not appropriate for everyone. The gentler, sustained, diaphragmatic breathing we've been exploring is more universally accessible and sustainable as daily practice. Apps can support practice. Insight Timer has thousands of guided breathing meditations. Breathwork provides structured breathing programs. Paced breathing apps visually pace inhale and exhale timing, which can be helpful for establishing rhythm. But don't become dependent on technology. The goal is to internalize the practice so you can do it anywhere, anytime without aids. Use apps as training wheels, not permanent supports. For measuring progress, several metrics can be useful. Resting heart rate tends to decrease with consistent practice as cardiovascular efficiency improves. You can track this with a simple heart rate monitor. Heart rate variability increases, indicating better nervous system resilience. HRV can be measured with chest strap monitors or optical sensors, though accuracy varies. Some people track breath rate, how many breaths per minute during rest. As practice develops, breath rate typically decreases. Normal unconscious breathing is 12 to 20 breaths per minute. Trained practitioners often breathe 6 to 8 times per minute at rest. Some advanced practitioners breathe even slower, 4 to 6 breaths per minute. Subjective measures matter too. Sleep quality, anxiety levels, ability to focus, creative output, sense of well-being. Track what matters to you. But don't become obsessed with metrics. Numbers can be useful feedback, but they can also create performance anxiety. If you're constantly measuring and evaluating, you're not relaxing. Practice for its own sake. Notice effects without clinging to them. Progress isn't always linear. Some days your practice will feel deep and powerful. Other days it will feel flat and difficult. This is normal. The nervous system has rhythms. Hormonal cycles affect breath and meditation. Life stress affects practice. Don't judge difficult days as failure. They're just difficult days. Continue showing up. The most reliable indicator of progress is simply whether you continue practicing. If you're still practicing after 30 days, 90 days, a year, 5 years, that's success. Consistency over intensity. A person who does 5 minutes daily for years will experience more transformation than a person who does 2-hour sessions sporadically. Build sustainable practice. Make it part of your life rhythm like eating or sleeping. Not something you do when you remember or when you're stressed. Something you do because it's how you live. This brings us to the final section. What is this practice ultimately about? Strip away all the metaphysical framing, the archons and Divine Mother and manifestation language. What's the core? You're learning to consciously regulate your nervous system. That's it. That's the whole practice. Everything else, the peace, the creativity, the intuition, the health benefits, the spiritual experiences, flows from nervous system regulation. When your nervous system is chronically dysregulated, stuck in sympathetic activation, unable to rest, always vigilant, you're suffering. Life is anxious, exhausting, disconnected. When you learn to regulate, when you can shift between activation and rest as appropriate, when you can maintain calm in challenging circumstances, when you can access your full human capacities, you're free. Not free from life's difficulties, free to respond to them skillfully. Breath is the lever. It's the one autonomic function you can consciously control, and through breath, you access everything else. This is why every contemplative tradition discovered it. It's not secret knowledge. It's obvious once you look. You breathe. You exist. The question is whether you breathe consciously or unconsciously, skillfully or unskillfully, in a way that supports your flourishing or in a way that undermines it. Sacred feminine breath is just one name for skillful breathing. You can call it whatever you want. The technique is simple. Engage your diaphragm. Breathe into your belly. Do it regularly. Watch what happens. That's the practice. Everything else is commentary. But the commentary matters because humans are meaning-making creatures. We need story, context, tradition. The Gospel of the Essenes, whether historically accurate or modern fabrication, provides a story. Jesus taught this. The church suppressed it. You're reclaiming it. That story motivates practice for some people. Others need different stories. The scientific story, this regulates your nervous system through vagal stimulation. The energetic story, this cultivates qi in your lower dantian. The psychological story, this helps you integrate unconscious material and develop self-regulation. The spiritual story, this connects you to divine presence. All the stories can be true simultaneously. They're different maps of the same territory. Use the map that helps you navigate. What matters is that you actually practice. Reading about breath doesn't change your nervous system. Thinking about breath doesn't change your nervous system. Breathing changes your nervous system. This is embodied practice. It requires you to actually do it, regularly, with attention, over time. There's no shortcut, no technique that will give you all the benefits in one session, no teacher who can breathe for you. You have to do the practice. That's both the limitation and the liberation. The limitation is that you have to put in the time. The liberation is that the results depend on you, not on external circumstances. You can practice regardless of where you are, what resources you have, what your life situation is. All you need is a body and breath. You have both. You can begin right now. Place your hands on your lower belly. Breathe in slowly, feeling your belly expand. Hold for a moment. Breathe out slowly, feeling your belly contract. Hold empty. Repeat. You're doing it. That's sacred feminine breath. Everything we've explored for thousands of words boils down to this simple act. Do it daily. Do it for the rest of your life. Watch how your life transforms, not through magic, through the cumulative effect of small, consistent practice. The breath that was always with you, now conscious. The body that was numb, now awake. The self that was fragmented, now integrated. This is available to you, not because you're chosen or special, because you're human, and breath is your birthright.